I'm Patrick Kanne. I'm standing in Amelia's Bakery, and this is the first edition of the Bluebeard Kitchen Series, and this is our cooking class for pasta. Today I'll be doing two pastas, both from central and northern Italy. One's going to be a Pappardelle with a lamb ragu. The other one is going to be a Cappelletti with a filling of spinach, ricotta, and it's going to be kind of dressed in a leek butter sauce. So, to kind of get started, you're going to need some equipment to pull this off. Now, not all this you will actually need. Some of this stuff can just be replaced with a simple knife. This is a bicicletta, which kind of gives you nice ribbon cuts. I've got bench flour for when I actually make the pasta. You're going to need a rolling pin, or if you don't have a rolling pin, you can use any round bottle, wine bottle, liquor bottle, as long as the label's taken off. I've got brass cutters. One is straight and one is fluted. This is just kind of for ornate cuts. Totally not needed. Like I said, these three can be replaced by a chef's knife. You're going to need a bench scraper to help kind of get the product off the table. A ruler is just always good to have around. It doesn't have to be a yardstick, but something that has inches on it, just so if you want to get your exact cuts down, you can have a reference. Pasta sheeter, you can either have a mechanical one or electric one, or you can just have a hand crank one. They both work just as well. And for the actual making of the pasta, we have two different types of flour. We've got 00 fancy durum, and then you can use either APF or in-house that we have at Amelia's. We have a combination of bread flour and Euro, and it just has a much better texture and flavor to it. There's 170 grams of the APF in here, 55 grams of the fancy durum. We've got 9 egg yolks. Some recipes will call for whole eggs. This recipe that I'm using today, that I've kind of adhered, I only use egg yolks because it just makes for a much richer, fattier, kind of better texture pasta in my opinion. I got 3 tablespoons of just water, 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. And you basically always want to start by sifting your flour. You don't want any chunks or dried bits in there. It's also kind of you can do it on a metal table, but a wood cutting board or just a wood countertop is ideal, because it'll also kind of suck out some of the moisture from the pasta. See, that's all the stuff that you don't want. Put it to the side. And right now we're just going to make a well. So right in the middle. And you definitely want to get it wide enough and have the walls with enough structure that when you actually put your wet material in there, it won't just seep out and you lose all your wet ingredients. So 9 egg yolks. The water. And the olive oil. Now you want to just start by kind of mixing I usually break up the eggs first, the egg yolks. You kind of just want to start working the outside in. Slowly adding more flour in until you're going to start to form a paste. At this point, you can kind of just start mixing everything together. Now, this is where you're going to get your bench scraper in. You can either use a plastic one or a metal one, doesn't really matter. I prefer plastic, and now you can kind of just start folding it in. And once it's kind of combined and not still wet, and runny. Now you can kind of get your hands dirty, and this is the fun part. You don't want to waste all this, you want to scrape it off. Now this is the kneading part. Gradually just bringing it back together. Now the reason why we're doing this, we're going to homogenize the ingredients, but we're also going to form gluten. They basically form in webs, and that's going to give us structure, and it's going to give us texture to the pasta. And it's going to be in two forms. It's going to be in forms of kneading, which is what I'm doing right now, and resting. Once you make fresh pasta after kneading, you have to rest it. And you can rest it up to 20 minutes before using. Ideally, in my opinion, 24 hours in the fridge. You end up with a better product in the end. And if you are doing this right, it should kind of collect every last little bit, and it should be sticking to the to your table. If it is sticking, you can always add a little bit more bench flour, and that's just the fancy Durham or the 00. So the idea right now, it's all kind of come together. We're going to want to basically bring it up towards us and then rotate it. Bring it back, rotate. Now, if you're in a restaurant and you're going to be making pasta by hand, this would probably be done in a mixer or a large Hobart. But if you're doing, this is going to be basically enough for two people. So you definitely don't need any machines to help you mix it. And it's just kind of more fun to actually hand mix it. This usually takes around 10 to 15 minutes, depending on your pasta dough recipe. Every so often, I kind of just form it back, smash it back down. See how it's already kind of starting to come together. It's still a little not fully mixed. It definitely doesn't have enough gluten that's kind of worked into it. You really want to work it in there with the palm of your hand. You can tell by the texture and kind of just the appearance of it. It's starting to get a little bit smoother. And this is kind of how I test it, kind of the bounce back. See how it kind of slowly bounces back? It still needs to be worked a little bit longer, but we're getting kind of close. In the end, it should be pretty smooth on the outside. So basically, it's going to bounce back. It's not going to completely bounce back, but now I've kind of got the gluten working. And this is where we just form it to an even ball. Make sure there's no air pockets in the center. So at this point, it's smooth. You can see the richness of the egg yolk. It's got bounce back, it's got some good texture, but it's going to hold its shape. But it's nice and firm. You want to get some clean film or some plastic wrap. Make sure it's wrapped really nice and tight. At this point, now you're going to just rest the dough. The gluten's activated and working, but it's a little too tacky right now to still actually roll it out or sheet it. So we're going to put it in the fridge. Like I said, 20 minutes at the least. An hour would be better, but 24 hours is, in my opinion, the best for it to actually relax. So, yep. Put this in the fridge. Okay, so this is a half batch of what the pasta that I just did in there. This has been resting for 24 hours. This is enough to make 2 different pastas, one pappardelle and your cappelletti. So I'm only going to use half at a time. Anytime you unwrap pasta or you're not going to use it, you always need to rewrap it or put in a container so it won't dry out. This doesn't have to go back in the fridge. It's actually better if it kind of tempers a little bit and not warm, but it's going to be better when it's not bone cold. At this point, this is why you have your bench flour. Kind of just dust a little bit on the bench or your table. Knock off the excess. And we want to get it thin enough that it will run smoothly through the sheeter. It won't bunch up, it won't fold, it won't tear. If you kind of go a little too thick and a little too aggressive, then it will tear on you. It's really hard to bring back dough once you start kind of tearing and over-folding it. So this is a KitchenAid attachment. I'm going to put it on the lowest to second lowest speed. And for beginners, it's better to go slower than quicker. You want to start off at 1, and this actually goes all the way up to 8. By the end, for both pastas, we're only going to go to level 5. Now, not every one of these are going to be the same, so if you're doing this at home, which I hope that you will be one day, it's going to depend on your machine and what brand you bought. So, starting off with the largest number, which is 1, not the largest, but you're going to feed it through. I like to do 2 to 3 passes on each number. And on the first number is where I'm going to fold and kind of get the elasticity built up. Just kind of stretch it as well. So, pasta, I'm going to do an envelope fold. And this is almost like the same process in kneading. We're kind of working the gluten again and re-waking in it. So one pass, I'm still on level 1, or number 1. Second pass. If you start to feel that your dough is getting a little tacky and a little wet, then you can always add a little bit more bench flour. This is still pretty good right now. So I'm not going to do another fold on it because it's pretty worked. But you could if it's still a little tacky and it's still a little soft. Now I'm going to go up to number 2. And you want to be careful with this part because it's really easy if you're not going to feed it in straight and you kind of have it off the side or kind of cockeyed. It's going to basically catch on the gears or the rollers on the inside, and that's where you get the overfolding, the tearing. So this is the part that you always want to watch. You can't just be looking at someone else or doing something else. You always want to pay attention. So on these numbers, after 1, I usually always do 3 to 4 passes. You don't always have to do that, but that's how I was taught. So that was 3 passes. Now it's starting to get a little bit tacky, so I'm going to throw a little bench flour on it. Okay, so now we're going to go to number 3 and still paying attention so it doesn't hit the walls. The idea is to get the pasta as wide as the actual sheeter. You will maximize the amount of pasta you can get out of it. Because in the end, if it's not even, we will cut off the sides just to make it even. And those side bits are great for another pasta. You never want to throw them away. You can put them in soups or other sauces. The Italians never waste anything. They always find a way to reuse it. What seems like trash or products that they can't use, they'll figure out a way to use it. So that was 2 times. I'm gonna put a little more bench flour on it. Okay, now we're gonna go to 4. Make sure there's not clumps of flour on it. And I'm using the top of my hand to kind of guide it until it kind of feeds all the way through. You never want to pull, once it's fed through, you never want to pull on it. You just want to let it kind of come into your hand, but still using your top hand as a guide. So that was twice. Three times. Now we're going to go to 5. And this should be your last number. And if you don't feel comfortable with working with such a long piece, you can always cut it in half, wrap this up, or keep it in a container so it won't dry out, and then you can kind of break it down into two different batches. I would suggest as a beginner or someone learning how to do this to work with as little pasta as possible until you get the confidence and basically the confidence in not tearing and ripping it. I mean, I've been doing this for years now and I'm still learning. That's it. So it should be thin enough that you can kind of see your hands. Some pastas and some pasta recipes, do you want to actually go thinner, and they say that you should be able to read a newspaper through it. For this preparation, I don't need to go that thin. So yeah, at this point, I'm going to break it down into 2 pieces. One is going to be reserved for our pappardelle. The other will be reserved for our squares for our cappelletti, or our little hats.